Initiation. In the ancient world, people from all over the world would travel thousands of miles to Egypt and Greece to seek initiation rites into the great temples there. They sought to know the mysteries held within. These mysteries included things like the way that the universe worked, and most importantly, the mysteries of death and rebirth or resurrection. Now, just because someone wanted to know about these mysteries did not mean that they were immediately initiated into this knowledge. A postulant who arrived to a temple had to prove themselves worthy of higher knowledge, and they did that first by being observed by the temple priests and priestesses, and ultimately they had to demonstrate mastery over the self and over their inner temple before they were allowed inside the physical temple. So when a postulant was ready to enter the physical temple, they were considered a neophyte, and they were allowed into the atrium to begin the process of initiation. Of course, there's a lot we don't know about this process because initiates were first sworn to a vow of secrecy, and most people kept this vow. But thanks to a few people who didn't, we do have a few clues about what happened in a few of the major temples. And the most exciting one to learn about, in my opinion, is the Temple of Osiris in Abydos, also known as the Osirian. The reason the Osirian was considered so special to initiates was because it was believed to be the burial place of Osiris's head. And when an initiate would enter the inner sanctuary or the Holy of Holies that held Osiris's head, this would become symbolic of being at one with Osiris, who was also considered to be a savior, and to be fully enlightened into the mysteries. Now, the actual process of being initiated was quite dramatic, literally. Drama played a very important role in initiations, and in a lot of societies, in a lot of mystery schools today, and in fraternities, and even in major religions, drama still plays a major role in education, right along with ritual. And that is because drama and ritual touch a part of the soul and help the subconscious mind to become enlightened in a way that words and logic aren't necessarily able to do. So think about a nativity scene that most churches nowadays in Christian areas put on every Christmas season. This is an example of a drama that teaches religious principles without necessarily using a lot of words, a lot of explanation, a lot of logic, but it still speaks to the soul. So this is essentially what was happening in these ancient temples. An initiate going into the Assyrian, for example, would first be met by an already initiated priest dressed as Anubis. Anubis, of course, being the god of the necropolis and the underworld, and in Egypt believed to be the one who discovered how to be rebirthed. So Anubis would guide the initiates down a dark, deep tunnel underground into the void and ultimately into the womb of Mother Earth. Now, returning into the womb, which was often filled with pools of water, was a representation of returning to the primordial womb, preparing to be rebirthed. So it is the first step in the death of the human self, in the death of the ego, in preparation to be received by the gods and ultimately enlightened. So in this womb-like experience in complete darkness, this is where pure knowledge and light can emerge from this darkness. So after this first initiatory step into the womb, once they return, they are led into another chamber where the weight of their soul and of their heart is weighed against a feather on a scale. And this feather represents Ma'at, who represents truth, justice, and being in alignment with cosmic order. And so if the initiate is found to be in balance with this feather, in balance with the cosmic order, then they would be found worthy to enter into the final phase of initiation. And at this point, Anubis, Thoth, and Horus, all priests dressed as these gods, of course, are the judges and the recorders of what takes place and who is deemed worthy to continue on. And once the initiate is found to be worthy to be in alignment with Ma'at, then they could continue on their journey to ultimately reach the center of the sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, to be in the space where it was believed that Horus's head was entombed. And more of the ritual took place there. And this was where ultimately the candidate was found to be at one with the essence of Osiris and would be considered fully initiated. And then they could go on to continue to study the deeper mysteries within the ancient temple. Now, of course, there was a lot more that went into it than that. We might explore that more in a future episode, but really, there are a lot of details that we simply don't know because the record is so fragmented. But ultimately, what was most important in these initiating rites was the death of the old self and the rebirth of an individual who is considered to have attained higher consciousness and to be in alignment with Ma'at and with cosmic order. And now, these initiates were expected to continue on living a completely different life than they lived before they were initiated into the temple mysteries. They were expected to preserve this level of higher consciousness within themselves and to maintain the inner temple within themselves at all times. And this is where I believe that we have an opportunity to not only study the ancient mysteries, but also to return to the inner temple. Overall, this is the purpose of the Ancient Mother podcast, to explore the great mysteries of death and rebirth and to apply the lessons learned there to modern day life, to learn how to take all of our challenges and transmute them into higher consciousness, into wisdom, into divine light, so that we also can be in alignment with Ma'at, with the cosmic order at all times. And as a birth and death doula, we're going to do this both from the practical side and the spiritual and esoteric side, looking at different ways that we can literally and metaphorically die unto ourselves and be rebirthed every day. This will look like exploring topics like near-death experiences, reincarnation, ancient temple mysteries. And my God, this light is killing me. But I'm so excited. So I'm not going to stop this just because the lighting is off and making me crazy. We're going to be talking with modern day morticians about green burial, natural birth, the esoteric and spiritual side of birth, the divine spiral, and so many other things related to birth, death, and rebirth that can ultimately be applied to everyday life so that we can be renewed again and again and continue our spiritual and personal evolution, honestly, within a shorter cycle of time. Because when we live from a perspective of everything is a life and death experience, everything is an opportunity to be renewed, our spiritual progress is exponentially accelerated. Without this, we are holding on to the old, staying in toxic relationships, staying in old mindsets and belief systems that no longer serve us, but we're dedicated to them because of attachments to certain social structures or communities. When we stop fearing death, we can fully live. And when death and rebirth become a habit, we can continuously let go of the old, learn from our experiences, and be renewed again and again. I will share today the initiating episode of the Ancient Mother podcast. I chose to launch it on May 5th at 5:55 a.m. for a very special reason, for a few special reasons. Number one being May 5th was the earthly birthday of my late husband, Kieran, and he was a major catalyst for change in my life and for personal growth and for an awakening to the truths and mysteries, especially related to death and rebirth. And if it wasn't for his traumatic loss, it never would have happened. So I know that every experience and every trauma can be an initiating force for change and for growth. And that's exactly what I want to explore here. I've also been seeing 555 all over the place, everywhere I look for the last several months leading up to launching this podcast. And frankly, May 5th was the wedding anniversary of my first marriage, and I am reclaiming this date. It is mine, it is new, and the old timeline is gone. And so it is. So I am so grateful for all of you here listening today. I'm so excited for this podcast. We are going to be talking about so many awesome topics. I hope that you'll jump right into episode 2, where I introduce myself a little bit more, talk about my personal journey, and ultimately how I got in front of you today. So while we iron out the kinks, stop having crazy glare through the window, improve lighting and sound, which you'll see in my first several interviews were totally off. I hope that you'll stick with me as I continue to grow, continue finding help for things that I don't know how to do. And this podcast is going to get better and better, just as we all are, as we face our own initiations and continue to grow. Thank you again for being here. I love you. I appreciate you. And I will see you in the next episode.